Good morning and welcome to this call. We're here at the permaculture teacher training. We have people from, I believe, 5 continents with a concentration of participants from the Levant. So Palestine. So we're going to talk about how advanced technology won't save the world. And yeah, and we want to have a conversation with you. You know, in these times of crises, we're here calling from the Mediterranean, and the Mediterranean's an interesting place. It's the cradle of Western civilization. It's a biodiversity hotspot. It's also the most deadly crossing for migrants in the world right now. And just on the other side of the Mediterranean from where we are in Spain, there's a collective regional genocide happening. There's also fabulous wealth. So it's I think a region that reflects the contradictions of the world at this moment. And it's interesting for that and many reasons. But maybe we could start off by talking about permaculture for refugees. And we have on the call, well, I see some familiar faces. We have Rosemary Morrow, who's a co-founder of the Permaculture for Refugees Network. I see Irina, who's a permaculturalist in the Ukraine. I see Nenad from the Balkans. So we have some interesting people doing interesting things. Maybe we could start out hearing a bit from Rosemary about permaculture for refugees.
So it started because I'd been working in countries after war and civil war. Vietnam, Cambodia, East Timor, occupied countries such as Afghanistan with the war going on. And I thought if permaculture works in these environments to rebuild countries after war, if it will work here, why wouldn't it work with refugees? Can you hear me?
Mhm.
Not cutting out. Okay. And that was my question. So I took it to a group of 5 people at the European Permaculture Convergence in Italy. And I said, how about we start permaculture for refugees? I will go back to Australia and look for funds, teach in as many refugee camps and situations as I can, and let's get some evidence, because we can't expand and play with the lives of people where they're so vulnerable, very poor. They are often refugees are at the mercy of governments, of military, of NGOs, all sorts of things that may or may not be ethical and reasonable. So unless permaculture worked for them, I was prepared to drop it, because I will not play with people's lives. So in a post-war situation, you can't say to people, we will grow you lots of food. You must say, we can grow some food, but it'll be hard to get the staples. And the fastest we can get are probably going to be lettuces and radishes or something like that. Then we had to build in amenity. So I came back to Australia and visited, after the next few years, 11 different refugee camps from the tropics to the Middle East, to temperate regions, to from Turkey, Greece, Bangladesh, I mean, you name it, whatever camps, and got permission there, mainly working with local NGOs, because I thought the knowledge would stay there, and then those people would continue to teach it. So we got the evidence that people wanted it, it was relevant and good for their lives. Also very difficult to apply in refugee camps, because you've got all these separate disciplines or silos. So you've got governance and women, and they often don't wash, and they don't talk to each other. And you've got, hygiene that doesn't talk to someone else. So you've got these separate things. And that makes it very difficult to get an integrated approach to a design which will benefit everyone. However, in the last few months, Alfred has had some interesting things from United Nations asking questions for Palestine and for East Africa. Because if the large organizations can learn it as part of their work, then they will apply good design into camps immediately. I can't give you brilliant news. We didn't transform 1 million people in Bangladesh because the government collapsed. There was a coup. The NGOs pulled out and haven't gone back. The people who knew it haven't got permits to go there. And now the mafia and illegal groups come across the river and raid the 37 camps. I was talking to Kyla, who was working in Iraq, and she said the NGOs are pulling out, leaving camps as undeveloped, untrained villages at the mercy of the strong. So you cannot guarantee that you will transform a camp. Years ago, Jeff Lawton designed a camp in Bosnia, I think, and then peace came to the country and people just took everything and went home. It didn't persist. So therefore, if we're working with refugees, what can we teach them? My conviction is, because we've got the results, it works for people in camps while they're in camps, and they value the knowledge more than possibly we do, because we have options and many of them don't have options. You're just in that camp or that settlement. You're at the mercy of someone else. But if we can give people knowledge that they can use in the camp, at their next point, or when they go home, then we've given them something of extreme value. Now, given the world today, what would that knowledge be? It has to be appropriate. It can't be the original PDC of 1973 or 4 with Bill Mollison, which was about having a garden and straw and resources and seed. When COVID broke out and the distribution lines broke, people had no seed in Bangladesh, including the camps. So we had to start seed growing. So don't eat the beans, save the seed. They'll save some. So it's a permaculture on the edge. The Turks, after their terrible destruction of that earthquake 2 years ago, have been doing some interesting work. We must know a permaculture that deals with water and cleaning it and using it in ways that wouldn't pass our local government. Our local government would be jumping up and down and taking you to court, but would indeed manage the situation for people so it's healthy. So today, the movement for permaculture for refugees has grown and grown. It's really expanded across the world and it's in demand, and we can't train enough teachers fast enough. And that's our problem. And we don't have a very good bureaucratic organization because none of us is very practical. So, you know, we are a fairly fragile organization who is utterly committed. And Alfred has become our Chief Education Officer. He and I work together on the course that these students that you can see in the photo have been learning. That course was based on the second permaculture ethic, which is care of people. Now, care of people is not saying, oh dear, you've got a headache and I'll give you an aspirin. Care of people means providing the conditions under which people have freedom to grow and flourish. And of course, grow their food and sell their food and all those things. But care of people means that people can have control over their lives. And we're working with communities now, not particularly individuals. So care of people in teaching means that each person is seen and heard many, many times. And for some people, they're seen and heard more than they've ever seen in their lives, but they don't always perceive that that's happening. So we changed the structure from alternatives to violence, and we use that process. And they do all their learning on the course materials. We don't teach them how to teach patterns in nature or how to teach, you know, challenges in the world or the function of forests and trees in rain and water. They study that and they teach it the next day. And they teach it to their peers. And in doing that, they're learning. And I'd be interested to talk to them later and say how many of you have learned a lot this week from others learning and teaching you in different topics. And they all meet with each other in groups. So building the learning community is critical, absolutely vital. Making sure everyone is seen and heard and everyone stops speaking as well to be fair to others, which is just what I'm going to do now. I'm going to be quiet, and I'm on Gundungurra land, which is an indigenous group of people here, a tribal group who never for a moment ceded the land, but kept the waters, the soils, and the biodiversity in superb condition and evolving under climate changes of 50,000 years. And my tribute to them is the sheer, I think, humility that comes from being able to live on that land without there ever being ceded to them, which I would like to do. Okay, I'll pass it over. Alfred, back to you.
Thank you, Ro. So as you mentioned, there's been a tendency over the last 4 decades for permaculture to be practiced in a somewhat colonial setting in the Western world. But I see on this call, there are many people here doing permaculture in other settings and very interesting work. As well here, we have colleagues who are doing permaculture in Palestine and in Lebanon and elsewhere. So maybe I'd invite people either online or here to share some of their experiences of doing permaculture in non-Western, non-colonial settings. And how is it useful? Also, what are the challenges? Or do you have any questions or discussion topics? We're all a bit shy here, aren't we?
Not shy, just.
Also, this is the mid-course, the midpoint in our course. Last night we had a big celebration. Lovely music from Lebanon, from Britain, from all over the world. So we're a bit tired here.
Alfred, how large is the group on site?
Yeah. 24 participants and 4 facilitators and 3 volunteers.
Do you want us to talk about our work?
Yeah, take care.
Hello, everyone. I'm Khalid Palestinian from Jordan. I would say my experience with permaculture is working in Palestinian refugee camp in Jordan called Gaza camp. It's for refugees from Beersheba and from Gaza. It's the biggest population of stateless refugees in Jordan for these people from these communities. And we did a couple of workshops on waste management, on compost making. We did the rooftop gardens for around 30 of the units and the homes in the camp. The compost making workshop was an intensive one. They did the Berkeley's method of compost, hot compost. We've also had worm bins installed in their homes and taught them how to work with red regular worms, which were brought from Australia by someone through a training course. That's my experience in Jalish camp. I also have a bit of experience. I was in Sudan for 2.5 years in a border city with Ethiopia called Gadaref. And the camp there is a site where when the refugees came, they came multiple times because this is a very high intensity place. So they came a couple of times. They came in the 70s, went back to Ethiopia, and then came back in the 90s. So their coming and going affected the environment there. There was a huge forest in the place of the camp, and it's all cut down mainly for firewood and for building materials. So we started to plant the open spaces in the camp with trees, with projects that combined both the host community from the villages nearby as well as the camp members. And through that, we talked about dispute resolution, and we talked about the other problems that both the host community and the refugee community were facing, and we brought out all these topics to discuss with them. So that's a little bit about my experience with permaculture and working with refugees. Thank you.
So I see Irina from Ukraine. I wonder, Irina, if you could share with us a little bit about permaculture in your context. And I know that when we did a teacher training together last May, there were some internally displaced persons who were sharing how permaculture was being used to address trauma from the war.
Hi, Alfred. Hi, everyone. As you know, it's almost 3 years from full-scale invasion of Russia to Ukraine, and our network of permaculture centers, like educational permaculture centers, exist more than 5 years already. And from the very beginning, our network and the network of eco-villagists, we organized a project that called Green Road of Eco-Villages. And we host a lot of internally displaced people, because many people from big cities, they have to run from the war and to live somewhere. And you know that it is a lot of challenge here. So a lot of people just lose their houses, homes, and they have no any other place to live. So we hosted more than 3,000 people in different places. It was like a network in all regions all around Ukraine. And for me, it was very valuable that all these first months of the war, it was exactly permacultural centers and people who grow their own food, they could help others. In all these first weeks, first months, there were no food in the like city shops, because all these connections between enterprises, big farms and market, they were just destroyed. And it was people from our network who could send food to some eco-villages or to some internal displaced people. My friends sent seedlings to the occupied territories, so that people who were free again, they could grow up something in new circumstances. And some farms, they took animals from those people from those owners who had to went to the war, or in contrary, try to escape from the war. So some of our centers really made a great job. And of course, our centers still working, and we're working all these years. We continue to teach people every year. We have permaculture design course, and it's at least 20 people who join us every year. And we made some changes for this course. The first one, we add art therapy classes every day of PDC course. So people could draw something or work with clay at least 1 hour a day, or even longer. We need it because all these 3 years we have all the time this iron sirens, and you live all the time with this feeling that somebody wants to kill you. So like all our bodies in big tension, and being somewhere out of the cities in the rural area where is the sirens not so loud, where you can relax and do something with your hands and touch the soil and grow food. It's completely changed your state of mind and your physical state. So it's really helpful. Some another changes that we did, it's one of our permaculture teachers, he said, like, hey guys, we have to invent some very simple things that we can teach our students to be more resilient in these days. And it was very interesting when the students, they made this very simple solar panels just to charge their phones. And when people return home from our course, and it was another attack on our energetical system, and students wrote to us that, hey guys, we really could use that solar panels at home, because when we returned, it was no electricity, and it was just the solar panel that we made with you. So yeah, I would say that our courses now, it's not only about permaculture, but about resilience, about art therapy, and of course about growing food. So yeah, and our organization also continued to work. We had wonderful project with Danish network of permaculture centers, and I saw Maria here. Maybe you saw her here as well. She's one of our designers, and we made 3 public spaces in different regions in Ukraine. The first one for in new built town for elderly displaced people. The second for how it's called, block for people with disabilities, and for 2 schools. And Maria was on the one of the designer who made who was involved in all of this project. So yeah, permaculture is really inspiring and helping even now in such times. Alfred?
Thank you so much. You know, I also see that we have Paulinho and Elijah who are doing very inspiring work in the Nakavali settlement in Uganda, and also Montoeli, who is the first PDC holder in Lesotho and in Southern Africa. Maybe some of you could share your experiences in doing permaculture education in your contexts.
Well, thank you, Alfred, and hello. Well, for me, I'm only limited to the communities around me, so I can only teach people or communities around me, and it's not formal meetings. I do it when there are public gatherings, or when the communities, or when the communities meet up for maybe something that has to be discussed, and we're called by the chief. So it's not a formal thing, because I'm only one here, and I need that support, resources to move around, and also I think to teach, I need to be maybe some other permaculturist, somebody, just to have a backup. But that's what I can only do. Besides that, I practice permaculture. I've started a small farm where I practice permaculture, and my family is very supportive. They are with me while I do this. They are always there. So that's my story.
Great, thank you. Also, I want to invite our colleagues here from Australia, our colleagues here on this training. Also, I see my colleague Sabrina in Switzerland is there with the PDC class. How people teaching in a Western context, what is your experience now as we're living in this time of polycrisis, and as we're realizing that, you know, the colonial model that has been a large tendency in permaculture isn't allowing us to scale up enough in permaculture. It's not allowing us to meet the challenges that we're facing. What are your perspectives on how can we create more solidarity, more resilience, more networks, so that, for instance, here in the Mediterranean last week, just to the south of Catalonia, we had the second biggest and deadliest floods in Europe this century. Just across the Mediterranean, there's a genocide going on. How can we build networks through permaculture so that when the crisis arrives to one region, there's solidarity, there's support, there's mutual aid, and when it arrives to another, we can return the favor? Would anyone like to share some thoughts on this?
I will.
I see Rosemary has her hand raised.
I don't want to talk too much because you all have so much more experience than on the ground. I think there are just two things raised by Montueli's comments and the others. One is that teaching in camps and small spaces has had a major effect on the curriculum. And we're all going to have to learn to teach with fewer resources and also with a smaller way of thinking. Can we grow tomatoes and some corn and some mint in a plastic bag and hang it on a wall? Can we grow mushrooms on a roof or in a house? Can we clean food when it's running through the streets contaminated with sewage? Can we clean it to a point where if we boil it, it's clean? What I think is happening is that permaculture was colonial, strongly colonial, coming out of European house gardens, farms. And what we have to do is turn it back to where most of the world are and most of the world are going to be. So it's from a 60-story building to 2,000 or 3,000 people per acre or hectare. That is going to be the change. But Montueli talking then, I know that he connected with the course that I had met Hamidi teaching. He was a translator for me in the refugee camp in Bangladesh. Then he connected up on a teacher training online with Montueli, and they both have a similar dream. The main problem is perhaps language. If people don't have languages, then it's very difficult. And places in war, we really cannot reach. So we tried for the South Sudan, we tried for the Congo, but the disruption's so great. And in those actual war zones, people are unable to concentrate. They must look at their resources and safety first. So we also need a preparatory teams. That's some of the people in the present course who are getting ready either online or in personal to work with low resources and difficult situations, because I think there's going to be so much more in the world. I don't know, another 50 years, it might be the norm. I'm interested in how we can connect. But when the war broke out in Ukraine, I think Alfred contracted Ukrainian permaculturists. When the Taliban moved into Afghanistan, I'd been teaching there 2018, 19 something, then we were able to help some people come out and move to Portugal. So having those global contacts in a really disrupted world is critical, as is having the knowledge to deal with different scale and fewer resources. I'll stop. That might have people thinking about relevance.
Hello again, Khalid again. I just want to introduce someone who's been my mentor for some time now, and my go-to person, the closest go-to person to me. Miss Abla is here. She's a mother, she's a big sister, she's a teacher, she's a community leader, and she taught a lot of people that I've worked with, that I know from the camps, a lot about permaculture, and I feel like she has a lot of insight that would be helpful for us. So, Mama Abla.
Assalamu alaikum. Hello, everyone. Thank you, Khaled.
Assalamu alaikum.
I don't know where to start from, and at the beginning, excuse my bad English, but as I understand, I'm here to talk about the impact of permaculture on rural area with camps, also refugees, and really I practice such a thing with Syrian, Sudanese, and Palestinian. Here in Jordan, in Middle East, we have a lot of refugees. As even myself, I'm a refugee, a Palestinian refugee, and I practice it with them. To be honest, I was focusing on teaching and training them how to make compost, how to manage the waste in the garden, in the backyard, and in their houses. It was the best period in my life. Engaged with people, honest people who wanna live in peace and wanna to be in good, healthy environment, having clean air, clean food, good food. Of course, there are many obstacles and difficulties, but still trying to solve them, and we are fine. I think we are fine. With permaculture, it's easy to find a solution for all the things we are suffering from here, especially with young people and with women. We are focusing on youngs and women. I don't want to talk too much. I want to learn from you and to hear from you also. Thank you very much for this lovely day. We meet lovely people all over around the world. And again, excuse my bad English. Thank you. Thanks, Khalid.
So I'm wondering if any of you have questions about this training. So it's a permaculture teacher training with the extra focus on refugees, but it also has the core curriculum that Rosemary developed to empower permaculture teachers and raise the standards of teaching through a non-formal education approach. Do you have any questions about the training? Or do you have any questions for our colleagues here about their experiences right now in the Levant, perhaps in Palestine or Lebanon?
I have one query. So you guys are in Spain right now, right?
Yes.
So how is situation there? This is the home made by you, or how this is where you are right now? How actually their situation?
You mean where are we right now? How is
Yeah,
it?
yeah.
Well, we're at an eco village called Vidalia in Spain, and everything is very peaceful and fine here, except for the second biggest floods in Europe this century that happened just to the south of us. But otherwise, we're quite secure and safe in this particular place.
So it is built by your community, or how actually this house and whatever you are right now means you are living together in this community village, right?
Yeah, I think I'd rather talk about something different now. It's an interesting question, but here gathered permaculturists around the world, I'd rather talk about permaculture in other aspects. But thank you.
Okay. I'm sorry if it's going
No.
wrong there.
It's fine. Thank you. But would anyone like to share the amazing things you shared last night, for instance?
Hello, everyone. Just two contributions. My feeling is that we need to bring in the arts much more than because the arts are basically the best way of people really expressing themselves and coming across in their own right to others. Because I think we still have a massive communication gap between, let's say, North and South. And the other thing is, I would like, as a person from the UK, I would like, and I'm new to this, so I would like to get away from this idea of the colonial legacy of now bringing permaculture into the global South, into places with difficulty. I'm interested in flipping that around and me going to the global South and taking permaculture courses there, because what I've learned on this course is that there's so much knowledge there that I can benefit here. We're just talking about growing tomatoes in plastic bags hanging from ceilings. That just hasn't occurred to me yet. If you know what I mean, this idea of we have just as much to learn in the north as what we can bring to places of trouble.
I have one query. You in permaculture concept is that you use 1/4 with you and means some amount of your growing thing for yourself and rest you distribute. And so how fruitful it is when you grow things means with respect to production.
Again, I think that for this call I'd rather not talk about specifics of permaculture. I'd rather talk about how we as permaculture activists and educators around the world can develop networks of resilience and solidarity and learn from each other's experiences. But thank you for your question about specific permaculture practices.
Okay.
Yeah. Maybe I could just answer a little bit to, we keep that priority of meeting needs. It's absolutely critical to permaculture, meet the food needs, meet the clean water needs, meet the shelter needs of people, and especially people who are really in vulnerable situations. But in some places you grow the food those people need in a plastic bag. In another place, you might be able to have 1/4 of an acre or an R or something of food. But that principle remains that you meet the needs first, and that means having seed and food and shelter and water. And then we work with cooperate, don't compete, and share. So those basic principles are there. But the actual techniques on the ground change enormously under situations where people are displaced. I think that's the big difference. And as for teaching, we want teachers who are able to make that creative move from there is nothing here to we'll find something that works, but also get the message across as easily as possible for learners. So those learners need methods that are highly visual or use materials or use their hands and it rained and then the tree grew and it gave us shade, because people working in second languages often miss things. And if it's translation, it missed. So try to teach with your body, with your hands, with your body behavior, and with all the things you can get to make that come alive. So the training changed and the techniques changed, but the permaculture syllabus didn't, from learning from working in really, really hard conditions. And they're going to get harder. Okay, I think I'll be quiet again.
Yeah, thanks for I have one query, but I don't know whether it's relevant or not.
Okay. Thank you. Right now, we'd like to hear from the PDC that is in Switzerland. Can we hear from the PDC?
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having us. We're really excited to join in and meet with all of you. We're in the last part of a PDC here in Switzerland, and I guess our intentions and motivations for being with you are very basic. We're trying to broaden our perspective of permaculture and come out of thinking just for our own small garden and bringing permaculture to a broader perspective now at the end of this PDC. And we're enjoying very much learning from you and maybe also being able to take better informed action in the future. You know, Switzerland is a country where many displaced people from all around the world come to, and I think it's important for us to learn about how these people, how we can help the integration and the valuing of the gifts that these people bring to our community. And I hope that permaculture is part of that process. And yeah, it's very valuable for us to be here and learn from you and listen. So thank you very much for this opportunity.
Great. Thank you, Sabrina. So I know it's a Saturday morning for those of us in Europe. and this is the day off for our students. If there are any last questions or comments, maybe we could share them now.
I'm just gonna, hello everyone. I'm Kareem from Lebanon, and it's a real blessing to be with all of our beautiful colleagues here, learning from one another. One thing we're doing lately is doing micro teaching sessions. We've done 3 sessions until yesterday, and it's been a beautiful practice where we actually imagine the context where we're giving that session back home, maybe imagining the kind of people we're offering this session for. And it's been a beautiful, I would say, practice to try to see how that can actually be accessible to the people we actually live with and interact with in our daily lives. And I think that's one big challenge, at least for me on a personal level, to bring permaculture language in an accessible way in Arabic in Lebanon, and it's not being felt as like a colonial framework that we're bringing in to our countries and dismissing the knowledge that we already all have in our local cultures. And so when we only speak about permaculture as this term permaculture without acknowledging all the knowledge that we have in our local resources, it can feel a bit challenging, at least to me personally, when I'm trying to do workshops there. So I think that's a challenge for all of us, maybe. But and one more thing about challenges is the sustainability or the durability of education centers. Like, resources is a big thing and we need to face it. We don't have resources to sustain our livelihoods as educators or to create education centers. And that's a big thing, whether in the south or in the north. So resources are needed, especially in these dire times, whether it's financial, whether it's land, people resources, knowledge, to be able to share and to build solid teams that are really doing the work on the ground. And the people aspect is very important as well. So just wanted to comment on that as well. Thanks.
Was really good.
Okay. He says his internet isn't good enough right now.
Could I just ask one question before we go?
Yep.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you to everyone for being here. First of all, I was there last night with everyone, so hi again. Amazing to see you all. I just wanted to ask how many teacher training courses are there focused on refugees at the moment? And maybe the question then in the larger sense for us to think about how can we create more? Because I think it could be, yeah, I would love to join. I know there's so many people here who would love to do more. So yeah, just to open that up.
Yeah. Ro, would you like to answer that?
Well, Alfred's been leading this together with Habiba and Yao and a team he's got in Europe. He's really moved quickly into this field and modifying it. We do have some people in Australia and we've got some excellent teachers in Malaysia. The other thing I think would be useful would be to draw on the experience of the Vietnamese and the Cambodian permaculturists whose countries were moved to ground zero. As you know, the destruction was enormous. And these permaculture teams were able often to start in the rubble and know pretty much the priorities and the entry points to getting things happening again. That would be a different, how do you get the resources? How do you get accepted? You know, some countries, even getting a visa could take you months and endless difficulties. You'll never know what they're about. And then an understanding of yourself so that in those situations, you can't be saying to yourself, what about me? I need a rest, or I haven't had my sleep today, or, you know, you need a resilience to go through with the people who are doing it every day anyway. So there's a whole series of factors as well. The people who can do it best and will do it best are the people doing these permaculture for refugee courses, because they're rubbing off and rubbing shoulders all the time to get that experience. So, you know, we have managed to send some money to Palestine, where there's a chap called Ali. I won't say more than that, because the Australian government says that we can't send money in because they're enemy or something. Anyway, He is helping build houses from rubble. Now, it's not redesigning Gaza, it's just helping people collect a window or a door or something and rebuild shelter in that environment. And the other thing is clean water and food. And somehow these emergency things, as well as long-term planning, it would require a little bit more, I think. But I think it's possible. And how we have to have more trainers to run these courses. And I think you're the people who could do them. You're the ones who are here. The people who are here are the ones who can do it.
So thank you so much. I'd like to just close with two thoughts. One is, I think that even just calls such as this, connecting people around the world, is a very useful thing that we can do right now. Because when we get to know each other, even informally, when crises strike, when there are emergencies, we know who to connect with. So for example, on this course, one of our participants has had his farm and his village destroyed. Now that I know him, if this person that I know needs something, then we can activate support networks. So let's continue to do what we can, getting to know each other, connecting, so that when the crises strike, we're ready to support each other. Because even here within Fortress Europe, where that has enjoyed some decades of relative tranquility, now, especially in the Mediterranean, extreme climate events, even in Germany, are really touching everyone. So the better that we can get connected and to know each other and to skill up, the better we'll be able to be ready to respond to these crises. So after this call, I will offer all of you the recording, but also the opportunity, if you want to share contacts. And also, I just want to mention that in order to fund this course, we have 2 crowdfundings that are still active. We're almost to our goals, which will pay off the budget for scholarships, for transport, for all of our expenses. So I'll share that with you. If you can share that in your networks, we would really appreciate it. Any last comments?
May I make a comment, please?
Yes.
I don't know. Am I heard? I don't know.
Yes. Sure.
So my name is Thomas. I've worked in permaculture for refugees for 25 years now. I started in Colombia, and then I spent a decade in Palestine and Syria. Recently, I've been working in Jordan. Tomorrow, I'm in Iraq. I also worked in South Sudan and Uganda. I just make a few quick points. Hopefully, they're not too dry, and I hope they're relevant. I think the first thing is to recognise that there are many different types of refugees. So, as Rosemary's pointed out, we have to come up with appropriate solutions for the specific situation. In many cases, refugees are not incarcerated in camps. They're living freely in the community. In other situations, they might be localized in camps under certain restrictions, and then in extreme cases, they'll be incarcerated in camps. And there's also phases to the sort of refugee experience. So perhaps the first one we could address as permaculturalists is to resist the people's displacement in the first place. What we often see is that local actors, for example, governments, will prohibit local people, indigenous people, from accessing the natural resources where they live. So they'll prohibit rainwater harvesting, they'll prohibit cutting wood in the forests or hunting, for example. So they create a dependence on the government-owned infrastructure. And then at that point, they can just, close the water pipe. And in that way, communities are forced off their land. They're forced to migrate without there actually being any sort of violent interaction between the stakeholder or the refugee population. So, and then, as of course we see in Palestine, this can happen time and time again. So once a population has been displaced, they often then move into more marginal areas in more fragile ecosystems, and then they can go through the same experience again and be moved on even several times a year, or as I'm sure Adla and other people will testify, that within a refugee's lifetime, they can be displaced as refugees, repeatedly through their lifetime. So this, resistance to being moved on again is always an important aspect of it. Then, I've been working for MSF. I'm starting work now with IMO, with the UN, and I've also consulted for many emergency aid agencies. So the industry, the aid industry, basically breaks down the response into two parts. There's the emergency response, and then that's followed up with development projects. But often in that initial phase of the emergency response, there's really no thought to any kind of sustainable design or kind of integrated permaculture design. And as I'm sure you're all well aware, that can be very decapacitating for the displaced people to have these services provided rather than actually to increase their capacity to manage their health and their well-being in their new situation. So I would just stress the importance of permaculture design in the emergency response phase to a people's displacement. So here, of course, first of all, we're looking at water and sanitation, disease management, dealing with the medical waste, the disposal of the dead, and shelter and fuel. And I think I would put it in that order. You see, I haven't even mentioned food yet, because if you've got a cholera endemic sweeping through the area because people don't have access to clean drinking water, or they don't have the means to boil the water, then that has to be the priority. And then, of course, we've got the development phase. So in terms of like the first response, which I think is actually resisting the displacement of indigenous peoples, or anybody, in fact, in the first place, we need to what permaculture gives us is a toolkit to enable people to access the life-sustaining natural resources where they are. So here we're talking about accessing water, using the sunshine either to generate, as a means for cooking or sanitation or producing food, and also, using the soil that they have at their disposal. Certainly in the region I'm working in now, in West Asia, in Palestine, Syria, and Jordan, there's fantastic soil everywhere. If only you can keep it wet, stuff will grow really well. So, people often overlook things like just the soil that's under their feet. These are the sorts of natural resources I'm talking about. And finally, because I know that we're finishing this session now, I would just comment on how we teach. So permaculture teachers will always be limited. Their time in places is always limited. Like people's access to these sessions is always limited. So I found the most effective model, and this was most effective in Palestine, is to set up a decentralized network of horizontal learning. So as you, as Rosemary pointed out, these vulnerable people shouldn't be experimented on, and yet we'll never have the perfect design, and we'll never quite know what's the most appropriate designs to be implemented in a community until you actually implement it. So what I found is that as much as possible, we develop these designs and integrate these designs and make them as appropriate as possible. But then when you implement it with community members, with the partners, then you do it on the condition that they will allow another family to come and see how they fix that problem. So if their problem was access to water, drinking water, for instance, then, you solve that problem for them. And then other people, ideally perhaps of the same religion, the same socioeconomic class, people from a similar cultural background can come and visit them and see how they did that. And then they will go away and they'll change it slightly. They'll go and they'll meet that family, and the family will teach them how they solve that problem, but they'll also teach them the mistakes they made, or they'll give some advice and say, oh, we did it like this, but with retrospect, we should have done it like that. So the design then actually improves with every iteration as it's taught horizontally through the community. And in that way, it can also kind of branch off into like, you know, sub-designs as, you know, certainly working in Palestine, you know, you have the Fellahin, who are, you know, like villagers, if you like, and then you have the Bedu, some of whom are still practicing a pastoralist lifestyle. So I noticed like with our solar technologies, they branched out into two completely different forms physically, like the actual technology, like diversified into two branches, one for people who are, you know, moving around with their sheep through the day, who just wanted to boil a kettle. And then the Fellahin needed a great big oven, you know, to cook these elaborate dishes for 30 people a day in. So, you know, the technology diversified. So yeah, I would just really emphasize this horizontal learning as an essential way for sharing the information as broadly as possible, because in this way you can quickly have tens of thousands of people who are learning how to implement these designs in response to similar shortages of particular resources. So I hope that wasn't too boring, and I'll shut up now. And thanks for coming today, everybody. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Tom. So we have one comment from Alan Clayton and one more from here, and then we'll close the call. Alan?
Thanks, Alfred, and what a wonderful gathering this has been. And I think the power of cross-fertilization of people from different backgrounds being able to share. And one thing that really resonated with me was, I think, our friend from Lebanon who said, do not underestimate the power of what is local. And I think the ultimate of the imperial model is thinking that what the answer is, probably with a capital A, or what is best is what comes from elsewhere, and probably the West. I live on Wurundjeri land, and the local Wurundjeri people have nurtured this land for 60,000 years in a highly sustainable way. And I think that what Ro Morrow has done in the latest edition of her book is to completely rethink it and to develop it from the margins, from the perspective of the marginalised and dispossessed. And I think the power of that changing of the lens from what was a fairly middle-class Western approach to what is necessary for survival, and particularly survival in the harshest areas, is a powerful way of refocusing. And I just want to thank Ro and Alfred and everybody for bringing forward this very powerful way of dealing with the necessities which are going to be thrust upon us in increasing ways with the climate emergency. And I hope everyone has had a really fruitful time together.
Hello, everyone. My name is Mohammed. I live in Jerusalem. I've been practicing permaculture for 14 years, 10 of them in Jerusalem, mainly working with schools and kindergartens, training kids and teachers on permaculture theory and practice, a lot of practice. I come in front of the camera and the mic to just share what's happening in my mind as I am here in the course. It's not like a comment, but more like an inner exploration of what is our role and what we can really do. And before I continue, I just wanted to say hi, Thomas. I met you when I came back to Palestine,
and you gave me a leucaena tree, legume tree from your nursery, and it still lives in Jerusalem, just that you know. So things that are happening in my mind is that, so we are 24 people here, and this program of Rosemary and the team here have been running for, I think, few years or so, and also the activism. But at the same time, I ask myself what kind of change we can really do. Okay, I've been working in Jerusalem, in Palestine for 10 years, and I feel like a little ant who have done nothing. Except despite the fact that I work is it's like, you know, it's my job and I do it every week. I teach every week and I implement every week, and I still feel very small. The impact is very small in terms of what you can see if we think about permaculture and the outcome of you know, renewable energy, gardening, self-sufficiency, all these kind of things, beautiful things that we're talking about here. The observation of reality of the amount of people, the amount of needs, the amount of support is massive. And the way I see it is the only change can happen only if big structures can do the change. Governments, etc. And I think about myself and look at the people here, and I feel we are really small to make a change. But at the same time, and also I want to add to that Gaza. When I think about Gaza and what's happening in Gaza, they are isolated from the world. The human rights is not helping. The whole international community is not helping. And if I was there, I assume I would lose hope in any international justice. So we are faced with this kind of situation, and maybe I will go out of this course and I will get a beautiful opportunity to work with the refugees from Gaza in Egypt, I hope, just to be able to do a little difference. But if I arrive there, like I imagine with myself, okay, I am out of this course, I know all my knowledge, and I go to Egypt and I start working with the refugees. But what we're talking about here is huge. People displaced, they won't go back. Maybe they won't go back to their homes or even to their locations. So what actually the impact that we can do? And this hopefully in my mind goes back to the point where the outcome is not physical, is not touched. The real and seeds of strength into people's being, in the being of people. To make them believe in themselves, not in the world, not in someone saving them, but in them being able to change. And I have to say, the dark part of reality is that right now, when they are living their reality, they don't think about it. They don't think about the future. They don't think about the collapse. They don't think about the apocalypse. They don't prepare for it. It happens, and they might think, why we didn't prepare for this for the last 10, 20, 30 years or so. So they can, as a community, prepare for this, but they don't, because the demands of life are just eating them all the time. So the moment of crisis arrives, and we're all left with like crazy situation. You know, like what to do. Like, I lost my land, I lost my home, I lost my family. This is crazy. This is like generational trauma for few traumas to come. So I think working on zone 00 for me is becoming really strong, which is the inner world. When we work with refugees to help with their own traumas, to help with their own inner world, to let them release all the survival mode, this repression that happens because of the shock. It's there where we can plant the most impactful seeds, because then they, as healed as possible, can go into the world and do the change that is needed to be done, and not us bringing a solar panel or planting a garden or making a greenhouse, or even bringing them a home. I have a friend of mine that is trying to prepare for the times when Gaza will be normal again, that they will provide caravans, but even that is not really a solution. So I don't know if you agree with this, but working on the inner world, on zone 00, is very, very important in crisis times. And that's it. Thank you very much.
So thank you to everyone for being on this call and being together at this time. I'll just close with a phrase from the Spanish Civil War, which I think is appropriate at this moment, at this time, which is that the destroyers may blast and lay bare this world before they exit the stage of history, but we have no fear of ruins because we have a new world in our heart, and this world is growing as we speak. Thank you so much. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Bye.